So hi everyone, welcome to this Linnean Society lunchtime lecture. We're delighted to have you here. It feels like a very timely talk. Many of you might have seen the news earlier this week about beaver wild releases happening down in the southwest of Cornwall. So I think this talk comes at the perfect time. So without further ado, I will introduce our speaker and pass over to Şeniz. So Şeniz Mustafa is the UK's first urban beaver officer and content creator for inclusion projects, working with the Protected Land Partnership and as a freelance event lead. She's also the secretary of the London Bird Club and a youth panellist for butterfly conservation. And she's got a background in ecology and conservation and is a published scientific author on white storks, but she's also interested in the ecological impacts of reintroductions whilst working to include local communities. I'll hand over to you, Şeniz. Thank you.
I always feel slightly self-righteous when I'm like, I got so many different titles. But yeah, all of those things are true. Thank you all for coming. That's really, really kind. I'm hoping by the end of this, I can convert you all into Beaver believers. That is the name of the game. So if I do my job right, that's what's going to happen. These are just some of our project partners, but I'll talk about in a minute. So I'm just going to quickly, before I even introduce myself, I just talk a little bit about what we're actually going to be talking about. So that way you know how the next, I guess, like 40 minutes is going to go. So we'll talk about what is the Ealing Beaver Project, our beavers, like beaver ecology and history, what our beavers have been getting up to, ways to get involved in things like that, and of course my very funny little GIF, little graphic in the corner because I love putting in jokes. So a little bit about who is on the team. So on the left-hand side is a lot of our team members, although that has grown a little bit now, actually, not even just including myself. But some of you might be familiar with some of them, like Dr. Sean McCormack, who's my manager, who's co-project lead with Elliot up here on the left as well. But of course, it's not complete without me because I obviously take my job very seriously. So, yeah, as said, so my name's Şeniz. I'm the Urban Beaver Officer, which is a pretty cool title. Doesn't necessarily say what I do. I do pretty much all the engagement and education at the Beaver Project. So say if you sign up to an event or you come to a talk, usually it's mostly me. So that's always a nice job to have. So whether or not that's doing tours and safaris, but it could also be, which is where I show you on site to spot a beaver. I also do like our volunteer days and any like survey days and all sorts of different things that are on our program, which you can access on Instagram. And I've been working there for this might be my 7th month. My job's funded by HS2, which I know. But it's basically given me like one of the few very paid roles to engage like 5,000 people within the span of my job. And it's been going really well, which of course might be helped by, and I'm sure some of you are here from the Amazing Wild London film with David Attenborough, which is crazy. David Attenborough saw our beavers. That's really incredible. And what a beautiful film that was. So I hope you enjoyed it and very appreciative to them if that's one of the reasons that you came to this talk today. So the history of beavers. The history of beavers is an interesting one, and I just include these pictures at the top here just to kind of contrast this idea that beavers are only a rural species, which in fact is not strictly true. We think of beavers living in the wilderness, which kind of makes you think, oh, it's something that's really far away, it's not near people, but that's not true. Beavers live amongst people in Berlin, in Vancouver, apparently in parks. And of course, places in the UK where there have been some not legal wild releases, but there are all sorts of places where you can find them. But of course, it's been such a long time since we've had beavers that people don't necessarily remember it. So these are just some fun pictures of beavers just clearly on a pavement somewhere or in a park or what have you. So in terms of the actual evolutionary history, so beavers are 33 million years old as a group, which is pretty crazy to think about. I think we always see birds as being dinosaurs, but I feel like beavers being 33 million years old is giving that a run for its money. We had over 100 species, including the mega beaver, which try and wrap your head around how big that beaver is. Huge, huge thing. But of course, we don't have that beaver anymore. We only had 2 species. So you have the North American, you can kind of gather where that was from. And then the Eurasian, which is our beaver, which came over through the Bering Strait and evolved about 12 million years ago. So kind of halfway through. The Eurasian American beaver look really similar. I will be honest, are very hard to tell apart, but they can't interbreed because they've got different numbers of chromosomes, which is quite cool. Who knows? Maybe they just thought the habitats are similar, will stay the same, but not quite in a genetic way. But the Eurasian beaver is our beaver, which naturally lives across all of Europe and Asia to varying degrees. But of course, as we all know, we lost our beavers. So a little bit of context on that. So here's the point where I usually ask people how they thought beavers went extinct, but I'll go through it slowly anyway. So beavers themselves, people used to use their pelts. So they've got a very insulating inner layer and the outer layer they can make kind of like waterproof. And so people would use it for clothing, things like that. So primarily hunting. People used to eat beavers. Couldn't tell if they taste nice, but I guess people back in the day didn't want to waste them. And I love this picture because I didn't make this. I found it on Google, and I just really believe there's someone who just shares the same kind of humor as me. Essentially, beavers are a little bit like dogs in that they have these glands. And these glands that they have include a substance called castoreum, which is why their Latin name is castor fiber. Now, you have to, I don't know if I have the trust in people, but they used to think it tasted like vanilla. I don't need to taste it to know that's probably not true, but we listen, we don't judge. That's what people thought. And so they use it for flavoring for like mead and things like that. But also, it also contains salicylic acid. So we'll talk a little bit later about what beavers eat. But because they eat mostly plant material like willow, they get the substance salicylic acid from it. And salicylic acid is also found in aspirin. So our running joke is if you flavored your mead the night before, you'd get the effects of the aspirin and you'd feel a little bit less ill the next day. But that could just be our running joke in theory. I did also find on Etsy you can buy these tablets. Now, I'm going to say I strongly don't encourage you to do this, but it is kind of funny in a way. But in terms of the numbers of when we lost them, so in England, we lost them in the 11th, 12th century, and Scotland held out a little bit longer in the 16th. And then Europe went down to like 1,200 at the turn of the century, pretty low numbers. And of course, as it all suggests, it is because of people. We hunted them to extinction. But that is changing. In terms of beaver adaptations, these never cease to be so interesting when I tell people this, because beavers are fascinating. So one of them is that they can breathe underwater for 15 minutes, and I will cover a little bit later as to why they spend a lot of time underwater. But 15 minutes is longer than probably the 45 seconds I could do. So I'm impressed nonetheless. They also have very sharp teeth. So beavers are, of course, rodents, so their teeth are very, very similar. You've got the set of incisors on the front of their teeth. On one side, it is orange. On the other side, it isn't. And that is because the orange is actually iron that they get from their diet, which makes the front part of their teeth very strong. And because it's only on one side, it makes them very sharp at the end. It's at quite a big point. So let's not stick our fingers in any beavers because they are very strong. And just like any other rodent, they grow throughout their entire lives. So, I mean, if you see like neglected rabbits and things, their teeth get very long, don't they? So they need to be eating strong, hard material, which I'll cover a bit later. But also beavers, between those front teeth, they have molars in the back, but they have a very big gap between them. And that is to hold like sticks and branches and things in it. So they are quite evolved to live with trees and plants and things. Their hind feet are really well webbed, apologies, which again, naturally you'd assume is to help them with swimming. They can swim at like 5 miles per hour, which I guess as a car probably isn't very fast, but for a beaver, I think it's quite respectable. Their tails are a bit like rudders, which help them swim, but also if they're threatened, they will smack their tails on the water, which I've witnessed once. It's quite interesting. You never hear the beaver coming, and the beaver doesn't realize you're there and goes, "Oh my God," and then slaps its tail. And it's like, I'm really glad we didn't overreact between us. But it does have a function. It's to basically say to other beavers there's a threat. So it is a functional purpose. They can also weigh up to 30 kilograms, which based on my Googling was like the weight of a 9, 10-year-old, just in a very chunky beaver format, if you can imagine it. So they're not small animals. They're pretty big, they're pretty chunky, and they can be over 3 foot long as well. So this is where we dispel all the Narnia myths. Mr. and Mrs. Beaver serving fish for supper. No, 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 it's not true. If we imagine that big hole behind their incisors, I always joke maybe a fish could swim through it if they actually ate fish. So it doesn't really make sense, does it? What they actually eat is plant material. So in the summer, they'll eat plants, so that can be aquatic herbaceous plants. And then in the winter, they'll eat sort of parts of trees. Now, they don't consume and digest the whole tree. It's the bit that is underneath the bark. It's known as the cambium layer. It's the living layer. That is the bit that they want to get to. So they're having to chew through that bark and then they can get through to the bit that they want, which is why their teeth need to be so strong. And it wears it down. So that slide. Now here's a lovely video of one of the beavers chomping something, so you can all get the full effect, hopefully. It's kind of like corn on the cob. That's what I think. And if you're lucky enough and you want to come on one of our safaris in the summer, sometimes if you're really quiet, you can hear them munching on the barks and sticks and branches and things in the bushes. It's very, very sweet. Here's just some evidence of some of the stuff the beavers have been doing on site. The one in the middle, they started that tree in August. So beavers don't necessarily start things consistently. They might start something, leave it for a few months, come back, do a bit more, go away for a bit, and then do a lot, do a lot. It's not consistent. So that tree is still up. It will come down at some point, but again, we don't know how the beavers work. Who's in charge? Is there a Gantt chart in their beaver lodge? We don't know. So sometimes it's just watching and waiting to see what happens and sort of predicting and things. But it is, yeah, beavers just have their own mind. They want to do things when they want to. So in terms of the actual reasons that we got the beavers, it does correlate into three different objectives. So one is mitigating flooding, second is boosting biodiversity, and the third is public engagement, which you're all involved in right now. So consider yourselves part of that. So first, in order to understand how they actually reduce flooding, you have to understand why they dam. So on the left here, you can see a picture of a beaver dam. You can see, I honestly think it's fascinating how they can build something like that. But they're doing that to hold more water, which is why on the left-hand side, you can see the water is a lot higher and the bit closest to us is lower. And that is because as much as you and I know that we don't have walls and links around, beaver doesn't know this. So beavers have evolved for a long time, being prey species. So being underwater makes you feel more safe. You know, you're underneath, you're less likely to get detected. It creates a bit of distance between you and the predator. And so by damming water, they can make the water go higher up in a certain area, and then they can hide. So if the water level's too low, expect maybe a dam might appear because the beavers will say, the architecture's just not quite right. So it's completely logical for them to think that, but you know, they don't know. And in terms of other prey, you know, otters and American mink can get to them when they're quite young, and also other beavers, which we'll talk about a little bit later as well. So a true ecosystem engineer. So yeah, they can reduce the flood risks. So by holding more water onto a specific site, they can then reduce flooding further downstream because they're holding it in one place, which we'll talk about again a little bit later, but is incredibly relevant to why we got the beavers in Ealing themselves, because the surrounding area is very urban, and it's to protect the other areas nearby, which we're next to a retail park. If anyone's read that, we are genuinely opposite of McDonald's. I'm not lying. And we're right by the underground station. And so it holds the water, it slows its passing down, and so it reduces flooding, which is why not only just green for the station, but you know, the houses and their gardens, that community, they were very prone to flooding. And in 2024, and as of now, I guess 2025, that area hasn't flooded for the first time in 10 years. So we're on a 2-year streak where those areas have been protected from flooding. So it just highlights how it's beneficial for the beavers, but it's also very beneficial for us as well. So a dry green station is a good one. They improve the water quality, again, because they're sort of filtering the water. I always kind of imagine like GCSE geography or O level or whatever it was at the time, where you have all the sediment that's in the water, it hits the dam, it drops, and then whatever's after the beaver dam is a lot cleaner, which directly links to why our biodiversity increased. It also prevents drought. So obviously last summer was really hot, wasn't it? And so many water bodies dried up, but ours didn't. We still had water on site. And by also having that, you improve the carbon sequestration because obviously it can dissolve into the water. So if anyone's into climate change, beavers also do help to a certain level as well. And yeah, creating conditions in which biodiversity can thrive. So again, here's some more evidence. So normally I get out a beaver stick or a beaver branch, but we're going to have to just use images here. And if you're asking what is that? Well, a beaver stick or a beaver branch is usually just a stick, a little bit like the one in the middle. With the way that beavers chew, they're always at a 45-degree angle on each side. So if it's this kind of slant at the top and at the bottom, it's usually from a beaver. And then you can see a little bit on the left in the middle where they've had the teeth marks where they've been stripping the bark off there as well. So sometimes I might come across a bit of blackthorn or something like that, and all of the bark will be stripped off. We'll have 45-degree angles on each side, and then the beavers have just left it and I've gone great. Which actually blackthorn's probably quite good for building material. If you think it's got all of those thorns on it, it can really grip on. This is incredible. So this just shows where on the left, and they are videos, I'll play in a minute. The left is where one of the beaver dams had water coming through it. So let me show you. You can see there. And this is just a demonstration of how quickly beavers can work. So that's it Thursday morning. This is the beavers working overtime overnight to correct, because of course the water cannot leave. That means the water level will come down, the beavers feel exposed, so it's something that they will want to fix quite quickly. And then the next day, it's magically fixed, which honestly I find incredible how quickly the beavers can work. It is so quick, and sometimes it can be very efficient if they put their mind to it. So it's incredible stuff. Now, I mentioned biodiversity. So biodiversity has increased. So prior to getting to the beavers, ZSL had come and they'd been doing some water testing, and they said that our water's basically a dead zone, which is not really what you want to hear. But after we got the beavers and they've been making their dams, biodiversity did start to come back. So we had kingfishers, which came back pretty quickly because, of course, the water was getting cleaner, which is a good sign of an increase of freshwater species. We also have frogs, so common frogs. I don't think really bred here before. And I believe it was last year, there were so many common frog eggs. And I've been seeing the frogs pretty regularly over the last few months. And I'm kind of hoping this summer is going to be like big frogmageddon. But I know that on our lagoon, it was just filled with common frog eggs all over. So that's one of the frogs that visited us on a volunteer day, which is quite sweet. The one in the middle is an incredible picture. I didn't take it myself, but you might think, what is that? Why is Şeniz showing me a little dot? A dot, it is not just. This is the egg of a brown hair streak butterfly. Brown hair streak butterflies are not doing particularly well. They're very, very picky butterflies. They only lay their eggs on new growth of blackthorn. If it is too young or the wrong species, the female will not lay her egg. And where we cut down hedges, which is so known as flailing, you then cut off the young growth, and that is why brown hair streaks have fewer places to lay their eggs. Now, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but of course, beavers like to cut things down, don't they? So where they cut or coppice blackthorn, it encourages new growth, and that means that the brown hair streak has more opportunity to lay its eggs in places. So we did a survey in January, and we found 242 eggs with 71 on beaver coppice blackthorn. So pretty awesome. The one on the right is kestrel. We get lots of birds of prey, kestrels, sparrowhawks, red kites, all sorts. And of course, we get different species of bats like nocturnal bats. I think it's called Malthusius bats, apologies for pronunciation, and lots of pipistrelles and things, which usually they crop up after we go spotting the beavers in an evening. So if you do book on a beaver safari, you might get a chance to see some bats as well. And then, of course, public engagement. I mean, if we're the UK's only fully accessible urban beaver project, how good would it really be if we didn't actually engage with people? It wouldn't make sense, would it? And when I say 24/7, that basically is what it says. The Beaver Project's never locked. You can go whenever you want. I don't recommend you come at 2 o'clock in the morning, but if the feeling took you, you can go. And yeah, that's a huge seller point. And then our other selling point is, of course, it's an urban project, which means that the capital ring goes through our site. People commute from work, they go to school. Canal boaters come through, of course, not on their boats, but when they want to walk through. And people come through all of the time. And that's really important for us to also then dispel this idea that people can't live amongst beavers, because of course they can. People can be trusted. And our project is a demonstration of how people and beavers can thrive together. And so that important part of that is what my job is. It's engaging with people. So on the left is me giving one of the many talks like I am today. In the middle is me and my manager. You can tell Sean loves his job. You can tell he does. How enthusiastic we are. We were holding a stall nearby in Greenford Quay, where we were talking about the project and Sean's book, Beaver Believers. If there's anyone who's got kids, that book is really, really sweet, which you can buy. And that was me talking to, I don't even know, it could have been 10 children, and they wanted more and more and more facts. So that was a lovely day. The top right was a bit of filming. So I did a film with Mountain Warehouse talking about women in nature, which you can see on their Instagram. And so I got to bring a bunch of friends along, talk about the Beaver Project and all the amazing birds that we have. And the bottom right is one of our many eager beaver volunteer days. I know it's a great name, which you can book on our Eventbrite whenever you want. And that is generally all the sorts of different land management tasks that we do. We generally like to let nature and beavers take the lead, but there are some things that we do, which I will show you in a little bit. And we do them on our Eager Beaver volunteer days. And then actually talking about reintroducing the beavers to Ealing. So it's really fun explaining who I work for, because it's not just one organisation, it's multiple. So you have Ealing Wildlife Group, which are all community volunteers. My manager's been chair of Ealing Wildlife Group for 10 years. And they were also the ones that reintroduced harvest mice to London. So if you saw the harvest mice in the Wild London film, it was actually from them. And I got to release one nearby, which was really, really sweet last year. Citizen Zoo, you all may know, there's lots to talk about. Their work in South Norwood Country Park, potentially bringing beavers back there. But they do a lot of stuff in London and Essex, whether that's beavers, looking at white storks, and all sorts of other different things that they do. They've got a site down in Surbiton where they reintroduce water voles back to London, and that seems to be going really well for them. Horsenden Hill is about a 30-minute walk from us. We sometimes do events with them, like the Big Gay Beaver Day, which I'll always regret I haven't gone. I'm going to try and go this year because it has been so infamous for how amazing it's gone. So they're lovely people down there. And Ealing Council is council-owned land, the project, and our ranger is from Ealing Council as well. Beaver Trust, talk about them a little bit more in a bit, but they did help with the site selection and giving a lot of advice and support. They know loads about beavers, so it's inherent. They aren't a project partner, but they are someone that we did work with, in addition to the Mayor of London, who has been talking a lot about beavers recently, and he was there when we released the beavers. A little bit more further context. So the project actually started with looking at water voles, but the site wasn't really ideal for water voles and the habitat that they need. But we do know that beavers help create good habitat for water voles by creating all these bodies of water. So maybe not now, but maybe in the future. And so why not go from a small rodent to the UK's biggest one, right? But the inception was all the way back in 2020. They started a beaver working group, which anybody can actually join. It's the same as the London White Stork working group in terms of concept. Anyone can join, and they have regular Zoom meetings. So it's working with lots of different people and organizations. 2022, they had lots of site visits, which again is what the Beaver Trust really helped with. Prior to us even having the beavers a long time ago, the Beaver Project was just parkland. The council then turned it into a wetland because they wanted to alleviate the retail park that I mentioned, because there's nowhere really for the water to go. And so it was try and hold it there. But of course, it wasn't as successful as it is now with the beavers. They then had a public consultation, which is very typical with this kind of stuff. You know, you want to see how people feel before you bring beavers in. And that included online surveys, in-person talks and events. And then it wasn't until 2022 where they applied for the license. And then in 2023, the license was approved and they got funding from the Ealing Council and the London Mayor's Rewild London Fund, which is, of course, why the Mayor of London is one of the people that supports the project. Then, yeah, we released. So you can see in the picture there, Sadiq Khan's there, everyone from Citizen Zoo, Ealing Wildlife Group. Our ranger is just unfortunately right behind the metal crate there. And that's all the beavers sort of being released. So we have had the beavers now for about 2 years and like 4 months, almost 4 months. So actually not that long with all the amazing changes that they've done. So in terms of the actual beavers, who are the beavers that we actually have? So we started with a family of five, and I'll run through them in a minute, but it is interesting to know where they've come from. So they came from Scotland. Now, in terms of the conflicts that beavers can have with people, it usually is with farming. Because of course, with farmers, they have their certain land and the way the water courses should be, and then the beaver comes in and goes, actually, I'd quite like to change that. And that doesn't always correlate with what farmers might need. And there are ways to manage it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's something that maybe they can happen or have capacity for. So he chose to translocate them, which translocate just means to move them. It's a fancy term. And so we're very appreciative of him for that. And it was actually a family of five. You kind of want them to be a family because beavers are not always friendly with other beavers, which we can talk about in a little bit. So it's important that they're kind of related because that way you know that they're going to get along with each other. So we had Mum Beaver. Remember how I said beavers can weigh up to 30 kilograms? She is 30 kilograms. We officially know her as Willow, but unofficially she is known as Big Mama. She is a little bit of a feisty one, but she is the matriarch because beavers are matriarchal. I don't know whether or not that means she's in charge. That might be a bit of applying too much human emotion, but she is a bit of a big one. The dad at the time we translocated them was only 19 kilograms, which is super interesting. He probably weighs a lot more now. But we think that maybe he's a younger beaver compared to the mum. Maybe the mum had a mate that passed away, and she paired up with him. That's our kind of guess. We don't know. But it is super interesting, and he's known as Woody, but between us, also known as Toy Boy. We all have a good sense of humor. Why not, right? Then they had a teenage daughter, so that could have meant she was like 1 or 2 or something. She's a little bit older. And then she had two younger siblings, which are known as kits. Babies are known as kits. Now, we'll talk about some of the others later. But what is interesting, and some of you might have seen that one of our beavers actually went to Wales last year. So not even last year, but the year before, there was another project in South Wales where the male beaver, his partner had passed away, and they were looking for a female beaver, and we thought, teenager from the first year, she's perfect. She wasn't having that one, so she never actually got caught. The first year they tried to trap, Dad got caught 9 times, which is really I kind of understand, a bed and food, I can understand the motivation. Um, but after 9 times, yeah, he's a bit of a cheeky one, I suppose. But last year, her two younger siblings from the first year were also old enough, like sort of 2, 3 onwards. You want them, that's the kind of year beavers do leave their families anyway and go off on their own. So that kind of meant, okay, we've got a good chance of getting one of them. And we managed to just get one of her younger siblings. And we thought, count your blessings. We'll send her off to Wales, and we do actually have a picture. So the beaver on the left is their beaver. He's melanistic, which means he's just this very dark grey brown. His name's Bart, and the one on the right is our beaver. And you can actually watch whenever you want because the Duffy Project, which is what it's called, has a live webcam, so you can see them grooming each other. And by the looks of it, they seem to really like each other. So that's just worked out well. It's created us a good relationship with another project, and everyone's basically happy. Now, the next year, so 2024, mum and dad, because only mum and dad can have babies, mum suppresses the other beavers from breeding through behavioral dominance. They had 2 kits, and then last year they had another 2 kits. You'll never be absolutely sure which beaver's which, but we did get this beaver in terms of their age, and we did get 2 beavers on webcam, and we think these 2 are the kits. And I always think it's very funny, so have a look. If you ask yourself what noise do beavers make, this is it. Now, I don't think anyone's expecting that. It's just a little meh, a little whingy noise that they make. So we did get that, and we also did get another video that's on our Instagram, which shows a big beaver going back and forth with branches, and a little beaver joins it with a little stick, and then another little beaver joins it with a mouthful of leaves, which you think, bless, it's probably just practicing. So usually the trail cameras is how we can tell how many babies they've had. So mum and dad are pretty consistent. They've had two each year, which would bring us up to nine. But of course, one of our other beavers is now in Wales, so now we have eight. Um, so some of the other stuff that we had to do in terms of interventions, which we show always on our guided tours. This here is a device where basically there's a metal cage you can see on the bottom right. That was always there before we even had the beavers. And of course, the beavers heard the leaving water and said unacceptable. So they were damming onto the metal cage crate, and it was then flooding the capital ring, which you can see on the left here. It's obviously not their fault. They don't understand the concept of a human path. So we just added some things in to sort of help reduce it. And that includes the metal cage you can see at the front, which means the beavers can't actually access where the water leaves. And the water just passes through those big pipes instead of to the left and the right. It's known formally as an outflow device, but also known as a beaver deceiver. So basically, it doesn't matter how much they dam this metal cage, the water's not actually leaving through it, it's leaving through the pipes. That makes sense. And the water goes underground for miles, and no one's really sure where it comes up. That's how far along it really goes. And that's it here. It's actually a lot lower now than it is in this picture, but can you see all of the material on either side? That's from the beavers. And you can see all the water that passes through there as well. It is incredible. It's not unique to us, although I don't think there's many projects that have two pipes actually, so that could be quite unique to us. We also did some other really cool interventions. So a pet project is that we have some black poplar on site, which I think on record is the second rarest tree species in the UK. And some of them are growing really well, which is quite nice. We just protect them with a sort of a metal cage around it. That's one of the things you can do to stop beavers eating things, or sandy paint, but that wouldn't quite work with a very small plant. And we have some culverts as well, and also these beaver dam analogues. So a really fun project we've been doing with the volunteers the last few months is where we have something known as an ephemeral pond, which only fills up seasonally when it rains. It's known as an upper pond, and just alongside it is a long stream, which again only would fill up seasonally. The beavers had gone up there historically, but they hadn't been up there for a long time. And really, because there was nothing managing all of the poplar and the willow, you had all these very spindly little trees up in that pond sucking up all the water. And because they were competing for light, none of them were thriving. And so what we had then done is in the pond, we had cleared a lot of that material to stop it sucking up all the water and help the water hold. But also in the adjacent stream, we sort of cleared some shading vegetation, and we built what are known as beaver dam analogues, which are basically fake beaver dams that we'd made to sort of encourage the beavers to come back up. And it really couldn't have worked better. I remember the first few months of the pond going, oh my gosh, if I just press my foot in the pond, the water swells up. Maybe it's like, it has worked so much better than that. And that's also partially due to the beavers. So this is a fresh update of this pond. And as you can see, it's actually ponding. It's working. The beavers had then gone up there. They dammed a little bit around it, but the funniest thing they did is next to our fake beaver dams, they built a real little dam in the stream, sort of going, yours is a bit rubbish, actually. Let me show you how it's done. And now the stream holds water, the pond holds water, which will be really good for some of our other wildlife. And it's just an incredible example of like how I guess humans and beavers can work together, and the power of the community and the volunteers to see something like this pay off, which is just one of the many joys I get from doing this work. What's next? So this is where we are. So we are really close to the central line. So if you're coming from London, pop on the central line, you get off at Greenford, and we're about like a 3-4 minute walk away. We now have where we have this underpass before you enter the site. We have these lovely big green gates that say Ealing Beaver Project. And then as you go through, you see these beautiful murals, as Lady Shauna had done with all the different designs and stuff. And then you enter the site. And you can also drive and park there because, of course, there's like a retail park and things like that, and buses and bikes and all sorts of things. So it is very accessible and quite easy to get to if the feeling took you. And in terms of getting involved, so on the left, you can see we've got the Ealing Wildlife Group events. So that's all of our Eventbrite. At this current time, we have all of our spring events available up till April. That doesn't necessarily include all of the walks. More walks will always appear over time. I just don't release loads and loads of them, just a few at a time. And we also have our safaris, which are specific to summer because beavers are a word called crepuscular. They only come out sort of sunset throughout the night and in the morning, but that only really works for us when the sunset is visible, which is around sort of 7:30 to 9 p.m. So that's why we only do them about June, July, August, and September because you need the sunset to be late enough that you can actually see the beavers, unless anybody has some infrared binoculars. So we've got loads of those available in July and June themselves. You can also have our Instagram and our website. You can also volunteer with us. So if you join us on one of our Eager Beaver volunteer days, we can always have a chat. We have regular volunteers that check our fences and our culverts, and we have volunteers that do freshwater testing if that's also something of interest. These are, our social medias on there, and our email address if you ever have any questions as well. And just because I like to end with a bit of a laugh, who doesn't enjoy a video of a beaver having a scratch? Who knows what it's doing, like grooming itself, maybe. There you go. I'll switch back to the other slide just in case anybody hasn't seen it. And I think that's everything. But I guess if it's not, people will have questions.
Thanks, Liz. That was fantastic. Really interesting journey of reintroducing these species to London that have been gone for so long. And I guess the experiences that members of the community have had along the way during that process is fantastic to see and fantastic to hear so many wonderful stories about it and experience that journey through your talk as well. We've got quite a few questions come through in the chat already, so I'll start going through those. But if anybody else on the call does have questions, please do pop them into the Q&A and we will endeavour to get round to them. We've still got about 20 minutes left on the call, so plenty of time for questions. So first of all, we've had a question about beavers being competitive and whether they're competitive with one another and how they actually go about resolving that conflict with each other and how it compares to other species.
That's interesting, yeah. So there's always so much to share with people that sometimes things sort of like slip through. So yeah, beavers cannot be the nicest to each other. So we said how beavers, like the teenager, she was kind of around that age where they would go off on their own, but that's not necessarily a safe thing. Other beavers can kill each other, which is a major reason why we would never have brought Bart into our enclosure because that's 9 different beavers that might not like him. So that's just not a safe thing. And you have to be mindful as well, making sure you release them into an area which is suitable and not stressful. And there's lots of different things that you have to do. In terms of resolving conflict, who really knows? Sometimes with beavers, it's very hard to say because they are overnight. So we get footage of them sort of through our trail cameras, which we have some. We don't have as many as we'd like because they do get stolen, unfortunately. So what we do have are sort of insights. But I think in terms of that, it's hard to say. I can tell you kind of my interpretation, but it's not going to be accurate to a true beaver. But I suppose if they have a less stressful environment, they might leave each other alone and sort of do their own thing. But it really depends on the beaver if they're related or not. And I don't think any of them would react necessarily exactly the same as each other. It's so hard to say. I wish I knew. If I could be a fly on the wall 24/7, I honestly, that's what I'd love to do.
Thank you. That's great. So that we've got a couple of other questions that follow along kind of similar lines about that kind of, I guess, I guess, beaver behavior. So one of which is about whether beaver siblings breed together. And then the other one is just a
Mm.
clarification question about whether the beavers in the Ealing Beaver Project are North American beavers. I think I could probably answer that one to say that they are the Eurasian beavers, but I'll let you correct me if that is incorrect, Şeniz.
That's all good. Yeah, there can be a slight risk. So, I mean, Heather, you might know a bit more about it than I do, but in terms of like releasing beavers into enclosures, of course, it would come up the concept of inbreeding. That that is something that you have to handle if they're all in one space. So if it were the case, say that like in Bart's situation where the partner died, you would take the kits out to prevent inbreeding because that can happen. So there are instances where that is possible, and that is another thing that you have to manage genetically. And I'm sure if you release them in the wild as well, like I think some people have like beaver stud books as well, where they keep track to make sure there's genetic diversity. But yeah, it is possible. Not in our situation, because of course the mum, she displays behavioral dominance and none of the kits breed with each other. It's just mum and dad. And yeah, as Heather said, they're Eurasian beavers. Although there are some North American beavers on the continent, which does make you wonder at what point did people know there was a difference? I think there's somewhere like Scandinavia, like Finland, but not ours, not ours.
Perfect, thanks, Shanaz. Yeah, I mean, that genetic diversity is such an important part of the success of the reintroductions, both within these enclosures, but also the wild releases as well. So for the Cornwall reintroductions that happened yesterday, not yesterday, on Monday, you might have noticed that those individuals came from two different locations, and that's just to help improve that kind of genetic diversity as well. That was kind of being alluded to there. And we've got another question about behaviour as well, just about a question about beaver houses and whether you could speak
That's a
about
good
these. I think
question.
we're probably referring to beaver
Yeah.
lodges here, but I'll let you take it away, Shanaz.
I'll link that to another question as well, because I think it's going to come up, which again, there's so much more. Our tours are usually like an hour and a half. So a couple different things. So yeah, in terms of beavers, so beavers will create lodges and dams. So we went over dams quite a lot. Lodges is where they sleep. So that can sometimes be located near the beaver dams as well. They're really interesting structures and they can be quite large. They're made, of course, of like lots of sticks and branches and mud and things. And to actually enter a beaver lodge, you have to go underwater and then up and in to get inside. They can have multiple chambers as well, which is fascinating. Like, is there a wet room? Is there a dry room? We don't know. We do have a couple lodges on site, but we're always very mindful about when we go near them. One of the few issues which we know that antisocial behavior in terms of the council, it's gone down like 95%. But we did have some boys taking some branches and sticks off of one of the lodges, and so the parents did take the kits out, which is why, we tell people about the lodges, but we don't really show them. And I'll also link that as well in terms of the trees, because I know that it will come up in terms of what happens if the beavers cut down all the trees, which I always say if beavers are 33 million years old and the trees didn't grow back, I think we just wouldn't have any trees. So if you come on site, we do show people because it's like I mentioned with the brown hair streak butterfly, where the beavers can't or they coppice something, it does grow back and it produces new growth, which again is why the brown hair streak can lay its eggs, but also how the trees and the plant life regenerates. So they will grow back over a certain number of years, just like how we coppice them, which again, I'd love to show all of you because the way they do it is so fascinating. But I'll leave that in case somebody has a question about it.
Thanks, that's great. For those of you that might have seen as well, you often see coppicing and pollarding happen on trees just on the streets as well, and you often see a year or two later they start to regrow. So it's kind of exactly the same behaviour there, but just natural through the beaver activity there. We've got a couple of questions relating to pollution. So obviously you alluded to in the talk about how beavers are able to help filter pollutants out the water and improve the water quality as it goes down the stream, but through their dams. But there's a couple of questions about how they react to being within polluted waterways. Specifically, in the UK, we have quite a lot of polluted waterways, and especially, the Thames have been come under criticism a lot for its water pollution in general. So how the animals actually react to these polluted waterways, and how it impacts their environment, and kind of what level of pollution within a waterway is acceptable, I suppose, to have the beavers there.
Mm. That's probably not a question I can answer to a T. There's a bit more physiological answer, but we do know that beavers do have a greater tolerance for things like pollution and sewage. So I know that they're not impacted quite in the way that we are, which is why they're able to sustain in these particular areas. Like there's some places where they have had sewage issues, and one of the solutions is to get the beavers in. So like I said, I don't think they're as vulnerable as we are, but what specific level I couldn't answer, but I can always find out the answer. I know a lot of things, I just don't know everything as much as I wish I did. But they are very resilient. Clearly,
Yeah,
we're not.
that's fantastic. Thank you. There's a couple of questions that have come in about uh, from individuals who are based in different parts of the world. So obviously, I'm sure we've got quite a few people on the call from the UK. But there's a question come in about from somebody who'd visited an area in southern Patagonia in Tierra del Fuego, the national park there. And they had 50 Canadian beavers that had been reintroduced in 1946, and they're now being considered to be a pest or an invasive species in that area because they're causing flooding and killing of native flora. And they don't have any natural predators in the area. So they've multiplied quite largely. And it's been estimated that they've destroyed about 25% of the local forests, apparently. So they saw warning signs saying, beware of beavers. So in this area, beavers actually considered detrimental to biodiversity. So it'd just be interesting to get some thoughts, I
So
guess, on that one. And
interesting.
then there's also a question that I'm just going to link in about Canada as well, that is asking from somebody based in Ottawa in Canada that they have otters that actually predate on beavers. So they're curious as to whether we have otters over here as well in a similar scenario.
I can see the first one. That one's so interesting. So I assume then, with the Canadian beavers, they don't belong in that area, which I suppose is why they're an invasive species. So that probably is a big reason as to why they're being quite detrimental because they're not adapted to that area, um, which kind of, I guess, makes sense. I always think you have to be really careful when you introduce species that aren't necessarily from that location because they can have impacts like that. Whereas for our beavers, it's a little bit different because they historically did live in the UK. So the relationship is still there. Um, are they considered detrimental to biodiversity? So no, where we are, they're considered beneficial to the species, which is why we've had such a huge jump. Is basically we're just reintroducing a species that once existed there. So we're sort of adding back that puzzle piece that was missing. Whereas I guess in that scenario, they brought in beavers to a place where they weren't historically there before, which would not be as good of an idea. Yeah, that's not great. I know there's like Heather, what's that other rodent? Is it a koi poo?
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
those
often
ones
get
have had,
mistaken, don't they? They look quite similar.
but they've been found in places that they shouldn't be in, and they I'm sure have like some sort of detrimental impact. So new release
Yeah.
species, there needs to be like that's why in order for it to be a reintroduction, they need to historic be returned to somewhere they were historically extinct. If they weren't historically extinct somewhere, then you're not reintroducing them. That's a different ballpark. What was the other question, Rami? I'm trying to
The other
find.
question was about natural predators, and somebody based in Ottawa who had otters that predate on beavers over there, and they were curious as to whether we
Mm,
have otters that might be predating on beavers here, whether or
yeah, so I
generally, I
mentioned
guess,
this, didn't
natural
I,
predation.
about things that can kill beavers. So when they're young, it can be otters and American mink, which if not everybody knows, American mink, I believe, were released from like mink breeding centers and things, which of course is for animal rights purposes, but I don't think people really expected the detrimental impact they can have. They can wipe out a lot of things, including water voles. They can wipe out a lot of them. But I know they reckon, I think last year there's no American mink in London. So that's quite good. We don't have otters where we are either. I'm not quite sure even how widespread otters are, but we don't have them in our enclosure. So at this point, we don't have any predators, at least I guess within our enclosure. It's not at all bad because they're not just wild. So we have 8 hectares, which is 4 times the amount you need for a beaver enclosure. You need to have at least two. So there are lots of space, but they can't be released as of yet to the wild, which is based on like the licenses and things like that, which I can answer if anybody wants to know.
It's fantastic. Thank you. I guess that's largely from the UK perspective why these reintroductions, we go through quite a stringent kind of licensing process in order to get individuals into these locations, because a lot of that licensing process is weighing up the detriments versus the benefits, and how we can work in both of those scenarios. We do obviously have the situations that Şeniz alluded to in her talk about the beaver bombings, which is the illegal releases as well that happen across the country. But we've got a couple of questions that are a bit closer to home from the UK perspective here. So one of which is just asking about which area was it? Let me find the question. Are there any beaver projects that you know of in the Midlands, for example? So I'm guessing that's somebody who's based over in that area. And then there's also a question from Leonie, who works for the Argyll Beaver Centre, which is in the west coast of Scotland, which is the original Scottish beaver trial site. And she's currently looking into doing some research on the impacts that beavers have had on the ecosystem health of the temperate rainforest that's there. And she was curious to know whether you've observed any quantifiable improvements in water quality, and if there's any monitoring framework that you've used to actually assess the ecosystem health over the course of that project as well. So a couple of UK
I
focused
wouldn't say I
questions there
know
for you.
of any beaver projects in the Midlands. I guess call me like too London focused. I know like the main was we had the ones in Scotland, the ones in Cornwall, and now we're looking at them in South London as well, which is I'm originally from South London, so I have a little bit of a bias. But they're popping up everywhere. So I'm assuming if you want to ask the people to probably ask the Beaver Trust, they have a great understanding of all the projects and things that are going on. In terms of the Argyll Beaver Centre, that's so cool. Like that is so cool. Sorry to be a bit jealous at the moment. That's really awesome that you're doing that. Um, yeah, so with the water quality, I think we do water testing and test the freshwater invertebrates, so all sorts of things like freshwater shrimp and things like that. It's not as scientifically rigorous as it probably potentially could be. So we don't have a lot of like data like the stuff that you'd probably be using in your research. We do sort of keep some things together like was it biorecording? We have some things that we use with that, and some other survey data and things like that. But because it's community led, it's not as stringent or as rigorous as it would be for scientific research purposes. But never say never. Like I said, I had my own paper out. You know, maybe we can plot something. But your research sounds really, really cool. I'd love to know more about it. Um,
That's great. Thank you. I think that was most of those bits for those questions. And that we've got another question in the chat about so many questions actually in the chat.
the
So
holding capacity one's a good one.
yeah, go take that one,
Am I picking
Şeniz.
that one
Yeah,
really?
absolutely.
So this is awesome. So this is a kind of question that I had when I started my project because like my past research was on like white storks and things. So I knew about wetlands, I knew a little bit about beavers, but this is one of the things that I thought about as well. Um, and essentially the mum is kind of in charge of this. So there is a lot of space for the beavers. And like I said, there's 4 times the space, but it's really up to the mum Willow how many beavers it can hold. So beavers can this is crazy. It was told to me that they can control how many babies they have. They can reabsorb the fetuses. Heather, is that what you've been told? That's what I've been told.
Yeah.
So if the mum decided that there wasn't enough space, hypothetically, she just would have less babies, less kids, which all the shortfalls of being a human. Beavers seem like they know what they're doing. Um, what
Great.
ones should we go to
I'm
next?
just going to come to, we've got one comment in the chat from Alan Scott that's just about coming back to that Midlands
Ah,
question that was
perfect.
asked. And somebody's just put a message there to say that Idle Valley Beaver Project is in North Nottinghamshire for that person that was asking about if they knew of anything in the Midlands. But yes, definitely the Beaver Trust would be the place to go to find out more information. There's a good question here from Dan Stewart about expanding populations, which I think probably links in quite nicely to that holding capacity question that we've just had as well, and about how with that expanding population, we might deal with things like human wildlife conflict, especially in London, for example, with specific regards to flooding, really there. But just generally, I think human wildlife conflict.
It's interesting because I guess in terms of conflict beavers and have compared to like a rural site and an urban site can be really different. There's even a student who's exploring it for her research, which is cool, who we've been sort of helping out. In terms of the urban, with the beavers, because they're holding the water within the enclosure, there's no real flooding risk for other people aside from maybe when they access the site. So we did have recently where we had this beaver dam, and for one reason or another, which I should have more time, they had extended it to flood a bit more of the area so they could access it. And that meant that our path did get flooded for a certain amount of time, which did cause a little bit of a problem at the time. But we kind of looked and we adapted and we put another outflow device into the beaver dam and it did resolve it. So sometimes issues can flow with access, so people need to go down certain paths. But that's why you have these outflow devices to help manage it, because not necessarily the beaver's fault, but it's also nice if people could access the path. And it seems to be working very, very well, which is nice to see. Um, but at the moment, aside from the project in Enfield, we're only one of two projects in London. Of course, the one might be in South Norwood Country Park. I think probably maybe the biggest challenge might be when you first reintroduce the beavers. So we had to close the site for a month just to let the beavers acclimatize, and that can frustrate people. Of course, people can come now whenever they want, 24/7. But that is why you do these public consultations and you work with the community. So, for example, with the one in South Norwood Country Park, if anyone's local, tomorrow Citizen Zoo. I'm so good at the plugs, aren't I? They're doing a talk in Croydon and they are doing an online survey to work with the people. I think if you just came in and you released beavers and just got on with it, you're not really including people in the purpose, which is why you have people involved in as many stages as you can to make it mutually beneficial. In terms of flooding, if they're enclosures, they're probably just going to be localized into the enclosures anyway. So as long as access, like the one I mentioned, is maintained, then it's generally fine. The issues are more, I think, in terms of like rural stuff, but that's very different. We are basically, the USP, we're not going to release our beavers, but our project is just to say people can live amongst beavers. We can show that it is possible and we can show that it is successful. I love all these questions. I could go on forever.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'm just going to raise a couple that are in the chat just about some people have put a couple of comments in about the otter point as well. There was somebody that's mentioned on Loch Lomond in Scotland. There are both otters and beavers on Loch Lomond, and they've
River
heard,
otter, yeah,
they've heard about
on the
otters
list.
killing beaver kits, and also the river otter as well that you've just mentioned, otters and beavers coexisting there. So potentially interesting places to go if you want to understand a bit more about that. We probably only have
Scotland is always ahead.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm literally, I'd love to visit. But that's the thing, like beavers are prey species and their predators have been made extinct. I'm sure as the numbers increase, it might help maintain the numbers to a proper level as things stabilize. So nature's not always nice, but it happens as it happens, doesn't it? And it's meant to be that way. So yeah, maybe the kits, possibly. Someone mentioned beaver earrings. I'm not wearing that. I love answers. I don't have these are just normal earrings. However, so I can say I've done my job. If you do come, we have like beaver stickers and mugs and posters and all sorts from a really lovely local artist called Millie Mills. So you can't see it, but on the back of my laptop, I do have one of the stickers on it. So if I could only reverse it and show you, but I would love beaver stickers. I've got a beaver hoodie and a beaver hat now, so it could just complete the entire look.
Absolutely. Maybe the earrings are the next thing you need. I think we've probably got time just for one final question, but just to kind of let you know, Şeniz, that there's a flood of messages in the chat saying how fantastic this talk has been and how much people have enjoyed it, and just to thank you for your time in giving that talk. I think it's been very well received, and we've had some really interesting questions and a lot of engagement through that Q&A. So thank you everybody who's attended and got involved. But I think just to finish, there's a question about the volunteering opportunities and perhaps whether you could put a message in the chat which perhaps you could just give a plug to where people can go to
Okay,
look for
so
those opportunities, and whether they're open to 17-year-olds and presumably
yeah.
younger for younger children as well.
Of course, the age is sort of what seems reasonable. So if someone's 17 and they come along with their parent, that's probably fine. Use your best judgment. And if you're not sure, just email us. So we said with the Ealing Beaver Project at gmail.com. I do work part-time, so I can't always respond immediately. But just if you're not sure, we can just have a chat with it online. So yeah, check our Eventbrite, Instagram, email, and of course, if you want to follow me as well, you can find me quite easily on Instagram. You'll see my face on the pro. But yeah, we do lots of stuff with younger people, like guided walks, and we're doing a morning bird walk and lots of stuff in the Easter holidays as well, and workshops for young people 18 to 30 as well. So trying to cover all my ranges and diversify the space as well and be inclusive.
That's
All that.
fantastic. Sounds like there's a lot of opportunity for anybody and everybody to get involved in the Ealing Beaver Project if you're local to that area or just visiting. It certainly sounds like a fantastic place to go and have a look. I've been there myself and it's wonderful. So would totally recommend to anybody on the call if you're local or coming from abroad. But that probably just gives me time to just say thank you very much again, Şeniz. It's been a fantastic talk. The talk will be going on the Society's YouTube channel for anybody who wants to catch up afterwards. So if any of the information you want to go back to, you can find that on the YouTube channel, such as the links to the volunteering, the links to the Ealing Beaver Project and so on. You can find those through that recording. But thank you very much for an amazing presentation, Şeniz, and for engaging so fantastically with the Q&A. And thanks everyone for attending.
And see you guys hopefully sometime soon.